Hey, welcome back to Well, That's Interesting. The both of these seem uncomfortable edition. Today is episode 202. Man receives kidney transplant while completely awake, and the oldest wine found so far had human remains inside it. Yeah, my friends, today is all about things going into people and people going into things. Best of all, the medical event we're going to cover and the archaeological discovery we're going to cover are both a first of its kind. And believe it or not, both have a feel-good ending. In the first half of the show, it's my honor to introduce a 28-year-old man who spent more than half his life knowing that one day he would need a kidney transplant. Since he was a teen, a number of medical professionals in his home state of Indiana used the latest technologies and diagnostic procedures to extend the life of those organs. But everyone, including our patient, knew it was only a matter of when and not if that fateful day would come. When it did, something we sorely need nowadays actually took place. Friends, near and dear, to complete strangers, banded together to do the right fucking thing. As an adult, our patient found himself in Chicago and in the hands of a new medical staff that felt now was the time to whip out an entirely new type of surgery that had never been performed at Northwestern medicine. Now, if I ask you to imagine a kidney transplant, what comes to mind? Like major fucking surgery and days in the hospital, am I right? And I'm sure the recovery time and the medical bill makes you a bit queasy too. Well, what if I told you there's now a way for people who are facing this seemingly dire situation to undergo this life-saving surgery as an outpatient? Yeah, doctors and nurses at Northwestern Medicine performed a kidney transplant using local anesthetic, i.e. the patient was totally awake, and within 2 hours, they were done. And the patient's recovery time in the hospital was only overnight. That's it. My friends, we will get into the kind of surgery that was performed, what the medical staff used to make this surgery so fucking quick and successful, and what this could mean for the 90,000 people in the United States currently waiting for a kidney transplant. Then after the break, we're swapping organs for liquids and moving on from a new chance of life to someone who was like, screw it, this is how I want to remain for all eternity. My friends, a team of archaeologists found a bizarre-looking liquid inside a burial urn within a Roman mausoleum in Spain. After 5 years of clickety-clack calculations of trying to figure out what it was, well, as you can tell by the title of today's show, they found a hell of a lot more than they were expecting. We will dive into the archaeological dig that discovered the urn. We will take a look at the results of the tests performed, including what the liquid was and its record-breaking age. And we will meet the man who wanted to be submerged in his favorite beverage. Take a moment to think about what beverage you'd like to be buried in. And in the meantime, hi, I'm Jill Chacha. And if this is your first time listening, welcome to the flock, my tasty business goose. To begin, I'm going to need you to bust out the box of pins you use to put in facts that we unpack later on in the show and make sure they're nice and pointy. We're about to stick a bunch of them in the following segment I call I didn't need to know all that about my kidneys, and now I can't stop thinking about them and if they're working properly. It really rolls off the tongue. I love it. Now, if you're a longtime member of the flock, you know there are a number of superheroes inside your body silently working away to keep you alive. Just recently, in episode 194, we learned that the wiring behind each of your nostrils relays slightly different information to either side of the brain, which means each nostril has its own sense of smell. And if you're wondering why we would need such a thing, do have a listen. But long story short, this is so your brain receives more details that it/you can use to make the best decision about that weird smell coming from behind a wall in your house. Today, we're about to learn more than you ever wanted to about another dynamic duo, your kidneys. Let's start with the fun fact that blew me away. Now, you may know that these organs are basically clean freaks. They're responsible for eliminating waste and excess material from your body by filtering it out of your bloodstream. So, how do they do this? I'm glad you asked. Let's talk about that waste first, which includes urea and creatinine. Urea is the chemical produced after breaking down protein from food like meat, poultry, and some vegetables. Creatinine is a waste product of muscle use. But that's not all they're looking for. There's excess material, like water, salts, and minerals such as sodium, calcium, phosphorus, and potassium, that in large amounts can also lead to health problems. So, if you eat, drink, or use any muscles, your kidneys are cleaning up after you, making sure your body sac is in harmonious balance. And they do this, my packed business goose, by filtering about 52 gallons or 200 liters of blood on any given day. Every day. Yeah, now that sounds like a lot, and it is, but you don't have 52 gallons of blood in you. No, you actually have about 1.2 to 1.5 gallons. And it's this amount that's filtered through your kidneys nearly 50 times a day. That's exhausting. I don't do anything 50 times a day. Now, if you're wondering where all that waste goes, no problem. Just have a seat, preferably on the toilet. Kidneys are why you pee. Our kidneys are made of tiny filtering units called nephrons, and there's about 1 million nephrons in each kidney. Our nephron friends are basically a teeny ball made of capillaries and a small tube called a renal tubule. That there liquid waste flows from the renal tubules into a duct known as the ureter. Sorry, but that does not roll off the tongue. The ureter goes from the kidney to the bladder, which eventually fills, and if all goes well, you take a piss and you don't even have to think about it. Well, if you're a long-time listener of this show, then you know not all things go to plan. Sometimes shit happens with your pee bits. Urine can back up and cause renal infections, aka UTIs, and minerals in urine can become crystallized, which form blockages called kidney stones. Not to brag, but I had one and it felt like someone shot me in the back, which, by the way, is where your kidneys are located, in your lower back, just a few inches above your hips, and they're about the size of a clenched fist. Oh, harsher that. Delete. They're about the size of a clenched fist. Now, having a kidney stone is bad. It's really bad, but I should really stop complaining. There are tens of thousands of other Americans out there with end-stage renal disease, or kidney failure. End-stage renal disease occurs when kidneys have lost about 90% of their ability to function normally. And this can happen after a years-long battle with diabetes, chronic uncontrollable high blood pressure, polycystic kidney disease, which is a genetic condition that causes fluid-filled cysts to grow, or something called chronic Okay, I can do this. Chronic glomerulonephritis. Glomerulonephritis. Nailed it. That's the one. Now that's inflammation and scarring of our tiny filter friends, prohibiting them from doing what they do best, cleaning your body sac out 50 times a day. Now, put one of your pointy pins in that and join me, will you, in the Indianapolis suburb of Zionsville, Indiana. The year is 2012, and at the time, barely 15,000 people lived in this close-knit town, including a boy named John Nicholas, whose health was a matter of concern since he could remember. As a young kid, he was diagnosed with Crohn's disease, an inflammatory bowel disease that causes chronic inflammation of the GI tract, which causes abdominal pain, diarrhea, weight loss, anemia, fatigue. It sucks. If it sounds like it fucking sucks, it does. But good news. There are a lot of things that could aggravate Crohn's disease, but the exact cause is still unknown. It may involve everything from an abnormal immune response to some microorganism in your tissues to genetics. And even more good news. Crohn's disease can sometimes lead to life-threatening complications. With that, let's get back to little John, who grew into a 16-year-old John whose health once again took a turn. Quote, routine lab work showed his kidney function had declined, and further testing determined there was inflammation in his kidneys that was causing the damage. But the root cause was never found. End quote. From news.nm.org. Well, my well-balanced business goose, unpin that chronic glomerulonephritis pin. Ooh, we know what can happen if too many of our filtering nephron friends are damaged. That's right, kidney failure. For the next several years, John spent his life trying to avoid this devastating diagnosis with various medications. But now, as an adult in his 20s, and after moving to Chicago in early 2022, it all caught up with him. His kidney function declined to a point where it was clear if he wants to see his 30s, he's going to need a kidney transplant. But good news. For real this time. For real. Chicago is home to Northwestern Medicine and a kick-ass team of medical professionals who aren't afraid to flip death one big fat middle finger. One of them was nephrologist Dr. Sibeli Gossin, who was one of the first to take John under her wing, directing him through pre-transplant procedures and actually stretched out the life of his natural kidneys for 2 more years. Dr. G's therapies bought John some much-needed time to find a donor. Which, if that sounds difficult to you, yeah, you are absolutely right. According to Ye Olde Mayo Clinic, there are at least 3 tests to determine whether a donated kidney may be suitable for you. There's the blood typing test, which determines if a donor's blood type matches or is compatible with your own. Then there's the tissue typing test, which compares genetic markers that increase the likelihood the transplant will last. A good match means it's less likely that your body will reject the organ down the line. And finally, cross-match, which involves mixing a small sample of your blood with the donor's matching blood type in the lab. The test determines whether antibodies in your blood will react against anything in the donor's blood. Long story short, there needs to be a perfect alignment of multiple biological factors, and that's usually why close relatives are a good place to start when finding a donor. My friends, brace yourself for this doozy. John's mother was an ideal match after all the test results came back, and it seemed like the search would end there. But after her own routine screenings, get this, quote, she was unable to donate following a breast cancer diagnosis, end quote, from news.nm.org. Yeah. Could you imagine not only facing your own transplant to live, but your donor and mother just got diagnosed with cancer? What the fuck? This was a blow on so many levels, to say the least. But for John, who has been fighting literally his whole life with this kind of shit, he didn't back down. He reached out to every soul he ever met, including a group of friends he's known since elementary school while growing up in Zionsville, and his best friend, 29-year-old Pat Wise, who was living in Virginia when he received a text. Quote, I was in my kitchen cooking dinner, and John sent a message that read, my doctor says it's time for me to start looking for kidney donors. I stared at my phone and without hesitating filled out the form that night, said the aptly named Wise to News NM. John is a good friend. He needed a kidney and I had an extra one. I had to at least explore the potential of being his donor. End quote. Well, my friends, I'm going to need you to brace yourself once more. But this time, for how much you're about to smile. Please, drop whatever organ you're holding right now and pick up your phone. Head on over to our social media stuffs and tap on today's post. The first photo you're going to see is John and Pat, decked out in hospital gowns, beaming ear to ear, each holding what looks like to be a plush crocheted kidney. Someone worked really damn hard on those. If you squint and look closely, they have cute little eyes. There they are. On the kidneys. My equally cute business goose. You've probably guessed by now that yes, Pat the Wise and best friend was a match, thus kicking off a series of historic medical procedures. But before we get into it, to really understand just how historic John's kidney transplant was, we need to talk about how kidney transplants are traditionally performed. And when I say traditionally performed, I mean it. The procedure itself hasn't changed much since the first successful human kidney transplant in 1954, 70 years ago. And if you still have our social media stuffs open, swipe on past John, Pat, and the delightful crocheted kidneys, and you'll see a delightful graphic of the human torso. There it is. Now, if you look just above the hips and behind the liver there, you'll see 2 kidneys labeled diseased kidneys. Okay, now, if you move your eyes down towards the hips, just above the bladder, you'll see a 3rd kidney. Yes, that's the donor kidney. Quote, during surgery, the donor kidney is placed in the lower abdomen, and blood vessels of the new kidney are attached to blood vessels in the lower part of the abdomen, just above one of the legs. The new kidney's duct, through which urine passes to the bladder, called the, you guessed it, the ureter, is joined to the bladder. Unless they are causing complications, the other kidneys are left in place, end quote, from the Mayo Clinic. What? They leave the old ones in there. I had no idea. I thought they did like a switcheroo. They leave the old ones in. Okay. Anyway, here's where I'd like you to lean in and add some more pins. Traditionally, these transplants are performed with general anesthesia, so you're not awake during the procedure. And general anesthesia is not something to fuck around with. According to the Mayo Clinic, patients have to spend several days to a week recovering in the hospital afterwards because general anesthesia can temporarily affect your memory, concentration, reflexes, you name it. Ironically, however, this extra time spent in the hospital to make sure you reboot successfully actually increases the chances of contracting an infection. Patients need to take a number of immunosuppressant drugs to help keep their immune system from attacking and rejecting the new kidney. So, if, my delicate business goose, we could avoid general anesthesia, we could reduce the time in which they could potentially pick up hospital-acquired infections. And that new approach could also make transplant surgery more accessible to patients who are at a higher risk of complications from that kind of anesthesia, like individuals with some degree of cognitive dysfunction or those with heart, lung, or other health issues, anyone at risk. Also worth mentioning, prepare yourself, in 2022, the average cost of a kidney transplant in the United States was $442,500 before insurance, $500,000. Yeah, and about $150,000 of that is for hospital admission. It gets worse, don't worry. The cost for general anesthesia is as bad as any lawyer's rates, coming in at about $400 for the first 30 minutes and then another $150 for each additional 15 minutes. Yeah, that adds up. Now, I know you said to brace yourself for smiles. You know I said to brace yourself for smiles. And after hearing those stats, you are not smiling. You're probably like, Jill, well, you fucking fuck. How dare you tell me it costs $500,000? Well, here the smiles come. Please wipe away your tears. And check out the next photo on our social media stuffs. You're going to see John strapped to a gurney, and he is still beaming ear to ear, and he's given 2 thumbs up. He is stoked. He's also surrounded by a medical team that looks like they just won every sports ball championship. Wow, and that's because, my friends, this team, including Satish Nadig, transplant surgeon and director of the Northwestern Medicine Comprehensive Transplant Center, Vinayak Rohan, another transplant surgeon, Vicente Garcia Tomas, an anesthesiologist, and a shit ton of glorious nurses, found a way to give kidney transplants a much-needed fucking upgrade. Quote, "For John's case, we placed a spinal anesthesia shot in the operating room with a little bit of sedation for comfort. It was incredibly simple and uneventful, but allowed John to be awake for the procedure, improving the patient experience." Not only can an awake kidney transplantation help patients who have risks or phobias to general anesthesia, but it can help shorten their hospital stay so they can recover more comfortably at home, end quote, said Vicente Garcia Tomas to news.nm.org. Yes, my practical business goose. John received a local anesthesia, a single spinal anesthesia shot, which is similar to what's used during cesarean sections. He was awake during the entire 2-hour procedure. And most revolutionary of all, after the successful surgery, which took place on May 24th, John was discharged the next day. He walked out of the hospital on May 25th, requiring 0 opioid narcotic pain medication. He walked out fine the next day. If this sounds a little too incredible, don't take it from me. Let's hear from the medical team and John himself about what's been called the awake procedure. I'm going to fire up a video on the news.nm.org website that explains it all. I'm pulling it up here, and the first few seconds are legendary in their own right. Okay, I'm going to play literally 2 seconds and pause it. It's incredible. So please lean in and listen to this.
That's the kidney.
So, I'll have screenshots about this on our social media stuff. But what's happening here is that the doctor has the kidney in his hand. Dr. Nadig is showing John his new kidney, and a very high John just responds, "Oh, wow." It's awesome. Okay, here we go.
Generally speaking, the less that we can do to a patient, aside from what they really need, the better off they are. And I truly feel that less is more. And in this scenario, the patient gets a kidney transplant, but is using their own physiology and their own biology to breathe and talk and interact the entire time. Are you awake, John? Your renal failure is cured, my friend. Let's
go. Okay. I had to pause again. If you didn't hear that clearly, Dr. Nadig was like, "You're cured, John." And high as fuck John is like, "Let's go." It's great. Okay. I'll stop interrupting. Here we go.
Which allows them a more rapid recovery. And in this case, the first one where someone was discharged just after an overnight stay after a life-saving organ transplantation. It's pretty remarkable to think about that.
Definitely by Saturday, I was up and walking around pretty much, fairly back to normal. I didn't really experience any pain at all during the procedure itself. Truly no sensation whatsoever.
This kidney's going to make a lot of urine, John. Yeah. So you're going to have to drink a lot of liquids, okay?
The spinal is something that we use for other types of surgeries. Probably the most clear example that comes to mind are cesarean sections. For John's case specifically, we placed the spinal in the operating room with a little bit of sedation, and then that was the main anesthetic. It was incredibly simple and uneventful after that.
We've gotten so much better at the act of doing a kidney transplant that we really can change the paradigm and move the needle a little bit and make it even easier for patients to move it from the realm of an operation to a procedure.
I went to school for biomedical engineering, so I've always found medicine and medical technology to be really fascinating in the first place, and then seeing it so up close and personal and literally directly applying to me was a really exciting experience.
My friends, I am happy to report John's been cured, yes, of his end-stage renal disease, and best of all, he could eat pizza again. Yeah. During his health issues, he had to make the biggest sacrifice of all, avoiding a cheese slice. But now, that is no more. In fact, brace yourself for another smile. During that interview, Pat the Wise surprised John with a pizza delivery. I know, everyone needs a Pat the Wise. In the meantime, thanks to this monumental medical achievement, quote, Northwestern Medicine will look to establish the AWAKE program, or Accelerated Surgery Without General Anesthesia in Kidney Transplantation, for a particular subset of patients that want the operation, can't have general anesthesia, or have a high risk of general anesthesia, or fit into a category where this could benefit the patient. It really opens up a whole new door, and is another tool in our tool belt for the field of transplantation, said Dr. Nadig to News NM. End quote. Sorry. I'm just so excited about this. I'm so happy for John and the 90,000 people on a waiting list. How fucking wonderful is all of this? After the break, we're leaving Chicago for an ancient town in southern Spain and leaving a second chance of life, a second chance at life, for eternal bliss. In the intro, I asked what beverage you'd like to be buried in, and now's the time. Please share it with the flock. Feel free to add your heavenly answer to the comments section under today's post on the social stuffs. And then, stay tuned.
Hello, listeners. This is Anne Bogle, author, blogger, and creator of the podcast, What Should I Read Next? Since 2016, I've been helping readers bring more joy and delight into their reading lives. Every week, I talk all things books and reading with a guest and guide them in discovering their next read. They share 3 books they love, 1 book they don't, and what they've been reading lately. And I recommend 3 titles they may enjoy reading next. Guests have said our conversations are like therapy, troubleshooting issues that have plagued their reading lives for years, and possibly the rest of their lives as well. And of course, recommending books that meet the moment, whether they are looking for deep introspection to spur or encourage a life change, or a frothy page-turner to help them escape the stresses of work, school, everything. You'll learn something about yourself as a reader, and you'll definitely walk away confident to choose your next read with a whole list of new books and authors to try. So join us each Tuesday for What Should I Read Next? Subscribe now wherever you're listening to this podcast, and visit our website, whatshouldireadnextpodcast.com, to find out more.
Hi, I'm Neil.
And I'm Lauren.
And we're both moderately successful trivia podcasters.
You co-host Triviality, and I co-host Misinformation, a trivia podcast.
But we decided to get together to make our own podcast, Curated by Chance.
Because we both love to talk about the topics we know a lot about. I'm an art curator who also teaches art history to engineers.
And I'm a filmmaker and author who loves movies. But Lauren hasn't seen a lot of movies. You're telling me you seriously have never seen North by Northwest or The Devil Wears Prada?
What's that? And Neil doesn't know a thing about art. So every week we use 3 random prompts from our trusty algorithm Chance, designed by a NASA scientist.
The great curator.
That will help us come up with weekly topics to tell each other about, whether it be an artwork, a movie, a book,
a pop culture event, a Broadway show, or even a TV show for dads, like Bosch.
So listen in every week to join us, 2 good friends with generalized anxiety disorder who aren't going to apologize for excitedly talking about the things we love for the first time in our lives. They made a TV show about Hieronymus Bosch?
Not the one you're thinking of.
And we're back. We are so back. And my friends, I'm going to need you to apply some sunscreen and pack your bags with the lightest clothes you have, because we've got a non-stop flight to the warmest city in continental Europe, Seville, Spain. And for my fellow geographically challenged Americans who are already experiencing another record-breaking hot summer and are probably disappointed to hear this and want to know why we are going and where this is exactly, don't worry, I've got you. Please imagine Spain. Wonderful. Point to the very southern tip. Okay, that is Gibraltar. Now move your finger up just a smidge. Okay, there is Seville. Not only the warmest city in Europe, but the largest city of this southern region, called Andalusia. Now, if you move your finger an even smaller smidge to the northeast, to the right of Seville, there's a town called Carmona, a quick 20-mile drive away, which is so fast, we just did it. Here we are. Now, Carmona is endlessly fascinating because this town just happens to be one of the oldest towns in mainland Europe. And Europe itself is fucking old, y'all. Let's take a moment and absorb just how far back this town goes. As we drive up to Carmona, we're welcomed by a large defensive gate outside a fortress known as the Alcázar de la Puerta de Seville. The gate itself goes back to Roman times, and the fortress belonged to the Moors, an Arabic and Muslim population that ruled this part of Spain for 7 centuries. If you feel a little hesitant about walking up the steps of its tower, don't worry. Major alterations were made in the 14th and 15th centuries, so we're up to code. Once we pass this fortress, there's a church called San Bartolome, built in the 15th century as well. Nearby is the town hall, which was originally a friggin' nunnery and a convent, built in 1621, until it was transformed and refurbished in 1842. So it's basically brand spanking new. Now, this is all impressive, but the creme de la creme of Carmona are the remains of a 1st century, that's 1 AD, Roman amphitheater, and a very interesting Roman burial ground called the Necropolis Romana that holds several tombs and family mausoleums from the 1st century BC to the 2nd century AD. And that was an ambulance. I don't know if you heard that. That was perfect timing. Thank you, New York. Again, this Necropolis Romana is from the 1st century BC to the 2nd century AD. Old. Now, although this town is clearly ancient, life continues. Homes are respectfully built around these monuments. But on occasion, the digging reveals that sometimes they're unavoidable. My friends, join me, will you, in the year no one remembers, 2019. It was here at 53 Sevilla Street. A group of construction workers had peeled away layers of road to reveal this. Everyone, drop whatever it is you're holding that's not your phone. It means nothing. Head on over to our social media stuffs and tap on today's post. If you swipe past all the photos of John and Pat the Wise and all the amazing folks at Northwestern, you're going to see a very dark entrance. Yeah, that, my friends, was once a doorway. And judging by the rock around it, it's one hell of an old doorway. It's so dark, I'm not sure if I could go in. No, I'm not going in. But I know a lot of people who wouldn't think twice. And those people are archaeologists. Archaeologists like Juan Manuel Roman of the City Council of Carmona and Professor Jose Rafael Ruiz Arabola from the Department of Organic Chemistry at the University of Cordoba, just a few miles east of here. Juan and a gutsy team of, well, horny for history folks, they passed through this archway and they found themselves in a rectangular chamber about 10 feet long and 5 feet wide. The long walls on either side of them contained 4 deep semicircles or niches, totaling 8 in all, and 6 of them held large urns. It was clear this too was a mausoleum, and they're the first people in centuries to look upon it. my excavating business goose. Swipe past that terrifying doorway, and you too will be one of the first people since 1 AD to have looked upon this burial ground. I'm going to bring it up here myself. Here we go. Okay, I have to say, this place is looking pretty good. It's pretty pristine for its age, and there's even some decoration and geometric motifs that survived. Check out the arched roof. That's pretty fucking impressive. Also in this photo, you could see that archaeologists have labeled the niches on the left side of the wall, L1 through L4, and L5 through L8 on the right. And we should probably talk about what was found inside those urns. What do you say? Great. Let's start with the not-so-surprising stuff. Each urn was filled with cremated remains and bones belonging to a person. Duh. The urn in L3, though, in the back, you see it? That was actually a limestone box. And those in L4, 5, and 6 were also boxes carved in local sandstone. L8 and L7, however, well, they were a bit fancier. What you see here in this photo, inside the niches of L7 there and L8, are jars. On the outside, they're kind of like casings. And they were made of lead. When archaeologists unsealed those casings, what they found inside was a glass urn in the traditional shape of what we think of when you hear the word urn. And if you swipe past this photo, you're going to see just this beautiful jade-colored glass. Okay, put an equally fancy pin in this. As for who exactly is in this mausoleum, well, it's a bit of a mystery. Only urns 4 and 5 bore names: Hispane and Senecio. The others, no details were provided, or at least details that could be found. But what we can tell, due to the size and the quality of this space, and that it's located next to an important road that connected Carmona with Seville, it's believed it once belonged to a high-income family. And thanks to some bony evidence, archaeologists can tell females were laid to rest in the odd-numbered niches, L3, 5, and 7, and males are in the positive-numbered niches, 4, 6, and 8. Okay, so that was the not-so-surprising stuff. Now it's time for what researchers of this discovery have called, quote, exceptional and unexpected, end quote. Let's get into it. We need to talk about funerary urn number 8. After the gutsy and horny for history team unsealed the lead casing, they were face to face with a glass urn. When its top was removed, to the fucking brim was a reddish-colored liquid. And please, have a peek for yourself. It's the final photo in today's post. Yeah, you saw that? What the fuck would you do if in your hands was a Roman-era urn filled to capacity with an unidentified liquid from 2,000 years ago? Please don't say drink it. Oh God, these are some desperate times, but there's no need for that. Do not drink it. Let's try testing it instead, shall we? That's what Professor Jose was tasked with since 2019. And now, my imbibing business goose, 5 years later, the identity of this perplexing liquid has been revealed. Now, I can't even imagine how many tests and theories were performed and thrown out, but eventually, the team over at the University of Cordoba had a eureka moment. They tested for polyphenols, because polyphenols are the biomarkers that are present in all wines. So, after these clickety-clack calculations were done, what was found? Drumroll, please. Thank you in the back. The liquid contained a whopping 7 polyphenols that are still present in modern-day winemaking regions in Spain, including the Montilla Morelos area, Jerez, and Sanlúcar. So talk about tradition. They're still making them the same way. What wasn't found, however, was the polyphenol stringic acid, which led the team to conclude that the wine was, in its day, a white wine. And this red coloring, you see, is due to aging. And, yes, mixing with the bones and ashes of a very dead man. Also, due to being a cocktail of human remains and 2,000 years of time, the wine's pH level is 7.5, and it has become neutral. For context, the pH level of local wines ranges from 3 to 3.5, which gives it a more acidic bite. So if you're curious as to how this burial wine tastes, there you go. Neutral. It's more like water. Also, that's kind of tragic, but if you're wondering about the man who decided to encase himself in wine for all eternity, well, we don't know much else, other than he must have really liked wine, and he had a thing for jewelry. Within the liquid was a gold ring, carved with the two faces of Janus, the god of beginnings, gates, and transitions. That's fitting. Also fitting, the newly discovered burial plot confirms that wine was very much a dude thing back in 1 AD. Yeah, wine was considered a masculine drink. It was so masculine, so much so, that in ancient Rome, women were prohibited from drinking it. It was deemed illegal. You can't have any. No, it's ours. So, fragile masculinity has always been a thing. That's not fun. So let me leave you with this amazing fun fact. This urn contains the oldest liquid wine ever found so far. Yeah, it surpasses a bottle of wine discovered in 1867, which dated back to the 4th century AD. Thanks to our 1st century wine lover, his urn outdoes that bottle by 300 years. And if you're thinking, wait a minute, wait. What did you mean by oldest liquid wine? Is there non-liquid wine? And is it older than this? Great questions. There sure is, and yes. The wine found here is, quote, significantly easier to consume than older wine-related archaeological... Have I been drinking? Let me try that again. The wine here is, quote, significantly easier to consume than older wine-related archaeological findings in which the alcoholic liquids are typically dried up, leaving only wine compounds. Such was the case in 2017, when a different team of scientists found the oldest evidence of grape winemaking in 8,000-year-old pottery fragments from the country of Georgia. People have been making wine since well before Roman times, but it's rare for the stuff to stay wet over the millennia. End quote. From Isaac Schultz of Gizmodo.com. 8,000 years. My friends, we have been drinking for a long time. And I have a feeling we're going to be drinking for a long time more. Yeah. Thank you for rating, listening, telling your friends about Pat the Wise. Compare your friends to Pat the Wise, like to their face, and tell them how they can up their game. Tell them about the oldest wine ever found and how this guy was buried in it. You know what? It's a good idea. I think we should all think about it. Treat yourself. And a drunken thanks to the folks over at Airwave Media, the podcast network to which WTI belongs. If you love this show, and you do, you love the other podcasts in this family. And please, stay interesting.